Hi, friends. I something that I've just been, I guess, not really pondering, but it's kind of like it's been drifting in the back of my awareness all day. Kind of started this morning, and has kind of persisted through a day where I think I finished up a one phase of this work on the album that I'm doing today, and it was one of those moments of like ticking something off the list, wishing and sort of expecting the completion to feel a little more like a relief, but instead it just kind of finally ticking it off the list just brought everything else back. It's like my focus had been so consumed by this one thing because there was a hard deadline today and we were kind of gunning for it. But rather than really feeling like, oh yeah, made it, great, it kind of was more like, done, oh, look at all these other things that I feel like I haven't been paying attention to. And, which is never a great feeling. It's generally a good feeling to have because it kind of reminds us what's most important. But what showed up, it's funny because the thing that I've been had in my awareness all day showed up way before I even had that experience today. And it was just a sense of, it was like I was sitting in meditation and there was this sense of, it was like I had an impression of the simplicity of life just arrive. And it was like, I think simplicity is the word that came through that I kind of labeled this with, just because, I think it was, I think sometimes about the Quaker tradition, which is one that I didn't really grow up in, but sort of got drawn into around the age of high school, and my family has been relatively, I would say, if we had to kind of pick a spiritual community, that's the one that by and large my family has always gravitated towards. And certainly there are a number of principles of Quakerism that I really appreciate, and I think that some of the values are values that I hold, even without necessarily calling myself a Quaker. But there's but one of the kind of things that's emphasized in Quakerism is simplicity. And there's even this song where it says, when true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend, we will not be afraid. And that was what was kind of running in my mind this morning. And I think how I interpret that line, which is kind of a beautiful poetic line, to bow and to bend, we will not be afraid. It's like to show reverence and to be flexible, to be available to the moment. And it's, but the setup for that is simplicity, when true simplicity is gained. And I think, how that shows up for me is in simplicity, in the way I understand that, we are never confused by the complexity of life. That doesn't mean that life won't be complex. It just means that the complexity of life doesn't distract us. It doesn't pull us away from the core, because the core is always obvious. The kind of simplicity of what our life is about in every moment is ultimately very simple. The simplicity is simple. I realize that's redundant, but what our life is about is ultimately pretty simple. And I think rather than striving for simplicity or attaining simplicity, I think we simply admit to it, surrender to it, acknowledge it. And I think, as I talk this out, what's showing up is that probably one of the reasons that's resonating with me right now is because if it's possible for me to get distracted, if it's possible for me to get pulled into a place where, for example, I have a big mountain of work, a big project, and I finish it, and I realize, instead of like really kind of finishing and being fully like, yes, here we are, here I am. I have the feeling of it. As soon as it's accomplished, things come back into focus. That tells me that I'm not in simplicity for that period of time. It tells me that I've somehow been temporarily kind of distracted. I think it's funny because that came up in a post of mine a day or two ago as well. And I think, there's something in this. There's clearly something in this for me, because as I was thinking through this morning, one of the reasons simplicity was kind of resonating is I was thinking back on some of the either teachers who I've had or just people I've been in contact with who really seem to live masterful lives, who really have that essence of poise in themselves and total trust in themselves, trust in the moment, total clarity about what is really important to them. And I think that sort of the impressions that I was getting from doing that reflection, they all kind of revolved around the theme of simplicity. There's not most of these people. Some of them are musicians. Some of them are more like other artists. Occasionally, they've been people who weren't explicitly externally creative, but you kind of had the sense that they were on some level. But there's the unifying theme seemed to be, at least this morning in my imagination, seemed to be a form of simplicity, seemed to be a kind of direct relationship to life, where things might be the world is going to throw all kinds of stuff at us all the time. Any number of things could arrive on our doorstep or in our lap for us to deal with. But the sense that we are simply grounded in what's most important. That's a sense that when I reflect on these, these people that I've witnessed, these mentors or teachers, it's like almost like a baseline assumption in their life, and they really don't have a lot of time. They really don't spend a lot of time being confused about that. And I think maybe that's something that I'm encouraging myself to pick up on, and to kind of take the steps perhaps, to allow my life to be simple, to just allow my life, what I do every day, to be simple. There's a kind of infusing things with complexity that feels sort of unnecessary. It feels sort of, on some level, it feels kind of indulgent. Although I generally steer clear of of using language like that creates a sense of judgment around it, because I don't usually find that helpful in resolving the issue. But I think about piano and music, and I think about the place I go when I'm playing at my very best. And the perfect word is simplicity. It's just presence with the moment. No frilly emotional, psychological ambition. There's no kind of no extra effort or energy being given to the process. It's just meeting the moment, meeting music. And so I think that's something that, again, clearly there's a reason why this showed up for me today in particular, but I think that's something that even overall in my life, it's something that I'm going to try and pay a little more attention to. This notion that life can be simple, that life ultimately is simple, that ultimately the feeling that life is complicated is a feeling we're choosing either to avoid that simplicity, or because given the number of complexes around it, aren't worthy of it, whatever it happens to be, whatever our version of that avoidance is. But I think I'm at a place where I want to encourage myself to allow life to be simple, and allow my intentions to embrace that simplicity, not feel like I'm always needing to pile on one more thing in order to evolve. So that's what's showing up today. Thanks for watching, folks. I appreciate you. Love you. This conversation means the world to me. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you tomorrow.